God afton och shalom vänner. Det är dags för en ny profetisk uppdatering den här kvällen, måndag 6 november 2023. Det kommer en video här med advokat John Haller som är då med svensk text. Och det handlar om Israel och Mellanöstern och sen också vart vi är på väg, vart världen är på väg. En intressant video. Det kommer en kort bit där Haller försöker att hitta en video i sin inspelning så att säga. Då kommer det lite reklam och så, där blir översättningen väldigt konstig, men det är bara en kort bit, så jag vill förbereda er på det. Jag har fått frågan från flera här om historia och vad som är fakta. Och bland annat därför att jag la ut på Facebook skrev så här: romarna kallade judarna för palestinier, därav Palestina. Det har aldrig varit arabiskt, det är en lögn. Så är det. Hur kom det sig att de som kallar sig palestinier idag, hur ligger det till? Jag svarar så här: arabernas stora feta lögn, ja det där tror jag feta lögn, det säger John Haller faktiskt på sin video, så det brukar jag inte uttrycka, men jag skrev så. Arabernas stora feta lögn. Det var romarna som kallade judarna för palestinier på 100-talet efter Kristus, och det var för att förnedra dem. Det syftade på och är samma namn som deras gamla fiender filisterna. Filister är samma alltså som palestinier på arabiska, och därav blev landet kallat Palestina av romarna. Det har aldrig tillhört araberna eller de som idag kallar sig palestinier. Det har aldrig varit ett arabiskt land helt enkelt. Mellan andra världskriget och 1948 var landet brittiskt mandat. Det bodde en del araber där, men framförallt judar och även kristna. Säkert många, eller kanske bara namnkristna, det vet jag inte, men det var sådana som bekände sig i alla fall som kristna. Först senare, jag är osäker nu här på, jag har inte kollat upp om det var efter 1967 eller om det var tidigare, 56 möjligen, då började araberna kalla sig palestinier, och det gjorde de för att göra anspråk på landet. Och det är en lögn alltså. Och detta är vad hela arabvärlden tror på. Israel har tillhört judarna sedan före David i Bibeln blev kung för cirka 3000 år sedan. Och när landet intogs av världsrikena, ni vet, Israel intogs av Assyrien och Juda intogs sedan av Babylonien därför att man vände sig bort ifrån sin Gud, ifrån Gud och hans bud. Då förföll landet och var mest öde som det beskrivs. Men det har alltid funnits en del judar kvar där. Och landet hamnade under romarna och även det imamska riket. Men alla länder har ju sin egen identitet och egna gränser även då. Och så var ju också Israel under romarna under Jesu tid, som vi läser om i Nya testamentet. När judarna fick sitt land Israel tillbaka genom omröstning i FN 1948 uppmanade judarna de civila araberna som bodde där att stanna kvar. De skulle leva tillsammans i fred. Araberna kunde leva som en minoritet i landet och de skulle leva i fred. En del stannade, andra flydde, därför att arabländernas regeringar befallde och uppmanade dem att fly. Annars var de förrädare om de gick in under judarnas ledning så att säga. Och detta ledde till problemet som arabländerna aldrig velat lösa. De bryr sig inte om de här araberna som kallas palestinier. Under årens lopp har palestinierna då, araberna då som kallar sig det, ökat eftersom de får ju ofta många barn. Och det var bara en bråkdel av dem som egentligen var flyktingar då från början. Men tvärt emot alla andra länder och folk så räknas ju alla flyktingar som föds och lever idag i det folket, och det är ju väldigt sjukt. Jag vill ta en liten kommentar här från som jag har antecknat sedan gammalt, och det är ifrån en tidning från Israels vän. Jag vet inte vilket år eller så, för det är gammalt, men det stod så här. Vad är egentligen det palestinska folket? Det är en teoretisk konstruktion för att sätta press på judarna. I mars 1971 publicerade den holländska tidningen Trove en intervju med Zahir Mushain, ledamot av PLOs exekutiva kommitté. Här är ett utdrag av hans uttalande. Det palestinska folket existerar ej. Skapandet av en palestinsk stat är endast ett uttryck för vår kontinuerliga kamp mot Israel och för arabisk enighet. I verkligheten finns ingen skillnad mellan jordanier, palestinier, syrier och libaneser. Enbart för politiska och taktiska syften talar vi om existensen av ett palestinskt folk. Av folkrättsliga skäl kan inte Jordanien, som är en suverän stat med definierade gränser, göra anspråk på Haifa och Jaffa. Palestinierna däremot kan utan tvekan kräva Haifa, Jaffa, Beersheva och Jerusalem. Det ögonblick vi får kontroll över Palestina ska vi vänta mindre än 1 minut att förena Palestina och Jordanien. Det sa alltså ledamot i PLOs exekutiva kommitté. Ja, så de visste mycket väl om sanningen. Men ni vet hur det är när en lögn upprepas, som man brukar säga tillräckligt många gånger, så tror man att det är en sanning. Det är lögnen om Palestina som är grunden till ambitionen bakom en palestinsk stat och det som ropas i demonstrationer idag om Palestinas befrielse. Citationstecken. De vill utrota judarna, precis som Hitler, och de vill utplåna Israel, för det är vad det mantrat handlar om som man ropar. Islamister och deras följeslagare har alltid gått hand i hand med nazister. Det ser vi över hela världen idag, och den som inte har förstått det, då är det dags att vakna och se sig omkring, förstå vad som händer. Men Israel kommer att bestå därför att det judiska folket stöder sig på bibliska profetier, och Gud har bestämt om att de ska ha landet Israel. Så är det med den saken. Ja, då kommer videon här, och jag önskar er Guds välsignelse och shalom.
In the south part, but mostly in the north. And Israel's kind of cutting the Gaza Strip in half as part of their military operation. But here's an interesting graphic. They have a thing that they call the Gaza Metro. They're the tunnels that they built, 300 miles estimated of tunnels. And here's a map. So I'm going to overlay the tunnels on top of where the damage is. So here's what it looks like. Do you see what's been happening? Israel has been targeting the areas where the tunnels are located. It hasn't been indiscriminate. And as they said, this is a big article, this is in the Times, we find a tunnel and we blow it up. Israel's being attacked by ballistic missiles, some from Yemen. This just was reported in the Telegraph in the last 18 hours. Israel shot down a ballistic missile in space for the first time in human history, coming from Yemen. One of the missiles actually was also shot down by Saudi Arabia. That's been confirmed. That's interesting. So Israel has a lot of capability. They said, we don't want your soldiers, America. We're going to do this on our own. And this is an article also in the Times saying what is and isn't a war crime in Gaza will take years to determine. So you see all the pundits, all the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian pundits running around, oh, this is a war crime, this is a war crime. No, Walter Russell Mead is 100% correct. War is not a war crime. Remember that. Here is... So here is, and this is the other thing, there are fake videos out there like crazy. So this was a video that was posted, or pictures, on the right, look at the dead people. But look at what the video also showed, or the picture also showed somebody doing, it was like Lazarus raising from the dead, right there in Gaza. You see the lady up there? And you see these pictures, these people being run into the emergency room, and they're pumping their chest and everything, and they're holding their cell phone in their hand. It's a miracle. TikTok addiction is bad everywhere, I guess. Here's another picture. This was to engender sympathy, this poor little boy. Now, do this. Okay, let's see. Thumb is number 1, index finger 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Somebody call L.A. Marzulli because I think we found one of the Nephilim. The world facing its worst economic crisis since 1938. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the people, the players that are involved. Of course, we have Iran, we have Israel, we have Haniya and I'm going to try to say Qatar. Everybody, it's so funny because people are like, you're not saying it right, John. You're not saying it right. Well, listen, guess what? I don't speak Arabic, okay? And you know what I'm talking about because you're telling me I'm pronouncing it wrong. And so the purpose of language, I tell this to my wife, she makes these comments. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, but you're saying it wrong. But you know what I'm talking about. And the purpose of language is to communicate an idea. And I'm communicating the idea of what I'm talking about to you, and you understand that. So, mission accomplished. Now, that's not, people don't like that. And people get pretty nasty. So, Haniya in Qatar. Of course, I'm watching all these people on internet. Qatar. And they had like whole videos when they had the World Cup there, like, how do you say it? And the guy says, I don't know. Then they ask an Arabian guy, and the Arabian guy says, he's from that country. And he says, you know, this is the way we say it, but some people don't say it that way because if you don't speak Arabic, it's kind of a weird sound to make, the way you have to do your tongue and throat, and you don't do that. And if you're just trying to say our country, we love you for doing that. So they love me in whatever that, however you say that country. So here's the, there's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Mahmoud Abbas in the Palestinian Authority, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Erdogan in Turkey, and of course Putin up in Russia. So I have a little bit to say about each of them, and of course Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, and there are a bunch of others, but these are some of the main players on the stage right now. But understand, well, I'll get to Haniya first. You understand he lives in Qatar. That's where he lives. He's the head of Hamas. It's a little bit of a ways away. So this is Erdogan. This is a picture of the Ottoman Empire at its fullest extent. You can see they controlled the areas down there along the Red Sea where Mecca and Medina are located. They were kicked out of there in around World War I. They lost Israel, area of Israel, Jerusalem in 1917. The British Army under General Allenby, and they controlled a lot of the area. So that their country has shrunk back quite a bit from what it was. They even went into Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, and some of those places. So they controlled a lot of the Middle East, and that's significant. And Erdogan wants to do this. So Erdogan, but I want to see that at the heart of everything that these people say is a big fat lie. Now, I want to make sure I say that the right way. It's a really, really big fat lie about how they talk about Palestine, in scare quotes. So here's Erdogan. He's speaking at the Organization of Islamic Countries in 2017, and he puts up this graphic, and this is how they say it. Look at Palestine shrinking. And it's interesting that Palestine right, is here. That was 1946, then 47, the UN partition plan, then 1948 to 1967, and then today. And it's the shrinking Palestine. And everybody uses this thing. But what's interesting kind of is the name that they give to Palestine in Turkish language. Philistin. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, because Turkish is not in my language repertoire either. English sometimes is. And my wife, don't pepper her with questions afterward, because she doesn't like to talk about it. So here's Erdogan at the UN a few years ago, using the same map, holding it up. And this is the guy, by the way, this is Hagia Sophia, the largest church in Christendom. And until the Ottoman Empire came on the scene in the 1500s, this church had stood there for 1,000 years. Huge church. But what did Erdogan do back in 2020? Well, it had been a museum, but what's he doing now? He's turning it into a mosque. It was a mosque for a while. And this was a picture. You can see they have our all appropriately masked and social distanced. And there's Erdogan in the middle. The first Muslim prayers in Hagia Sophia in 86 years. Turning it into a mosque. This is his thing when Trump wanted to move the embassy to Jerusalem. This is the map that one of Erdogan's newspapers put up. One of his mouthpiece newspapers. I don't know if he owns it. And it looks a lot like Ezekiel 38. Yeah, it has some people included in it that I don't think are included, but it's pretty good. And what's he doing? This is a video this morning in Turkey. Where are all those people going? They're going to protest at a U.S. base in Turkey, because U.S. supports Israel. They're as bad as Israel. Here's Mahmoud Abbas. Here he is at the UN, and he's using the same map. Look at how Palestine has shrunk. Here he is talking to a Palestinian group. He's using that map again. Here's our Secretary of State with him yesterday, shaking his hand. Here's the point. Well, I'll give you the point in just a moment. By the way, a few years ago, they opened a museum of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Museum. But listen, look at what the headline says. It opened without artifacts, but it's still a beacon of hope. Oh, wait a minute. It didn't have Palestinian artifacts when they opened it? These are the headings. Symbolism in stone is what the article said. It's symbolic, because we don't have any facts or things to back it up. I mean, you go to the British Museum and you'll see there's a good book out there, The Bible and the British Museum. If you ever go to the British Museum in London, there's tons of biblical stuff there. There's tons of Assyrian stuff there. Sennacherib cylinder talks about things in the Bible. The museum is more than its contents. Well, its contents are empty. And even the Trump plan sort of took off on these fake maps of Palestine. This is a Mennonite publication, the Mennonite Central Committee in Palestine and Israel. And here, what do? Palestine loss of land 1946 to 2014 when this was published. It's the same map. But what's wrong with it? Here's another website that I can't remember the name of this one. You can Google it. You can find it. It's a pro-Palestinian website. And so the light areas are Jewish areas. And they said, look at how this changed. Palestine was all this, and the Jews came in. But guess what? There was not a Palestine. That's the point. It's all fake. The whole thing is premised on a big fat lie. There was not a Palestine. The Palestinian Authority came into being in 1964. It was actually done with the instigation or assistance of the KGB because they wanted to cause chaos. They knew what they were doing. It sure worked, hasn't it? Here we are 60 years later. And I said, they want to say we got to go back to the 67 line. So the blue area would be Israel and the brown area would be Palestine. And that's the 1967 border. Some people call those the Auschwitz lines because Israel wouldn't be able to defend itself. I say don't do the 1916 borders, do the 967 BC borders, and you'll have a better representation. I would be on board with that. The 67 borders, 967 BC. And here's a map. This is laying on its side. This is a very well done map. It's done by some pro-Palestinian group to show things. But here's the point. Look at this. Arab population of Israel in 1967 was 390,000. In the West Bank at that time, Jewish, 0. Jewish population in the Gaza Strip, 0. Jewish population of East Jerusalem, 0. How's the genocide going? Well, when this thing started, back in the 60s, there were roughly 1.1 million Arabs in this area. Now there are over 5 million. Worst genocide in history in terms of failure. Worst failure at genocide in history. And here's a map. This is an interesting thing. So when the war started, Israel declares itself a nation, May 14th, 1948. And here's some of the populations in Muslim countries. So, for example, Egypt, 75,000. By 2005, there were 100 Jews in Egypt. Libya, 38,000 to 0. Morocco, 265,000 to 3,000. Syria, 30,000 to 100. Yemen, 55,000 to 200. Where were all the people demonstrating about the genocide of Jewish people in Arab countries and the relocation of Jewish populations, forced relocation of Jewish populations? Oh, well, they all left voluntarily. Well, then maybe the Palestinians left voluntarily in 1948. And you people, oh, by the way, I've been all over Israel. I've yet to see a Jewish refugee camp. I go into the Arab-controlled West Bank, and I see refugee camps. I go to Jordan, I see refugee camps. I don't go to Syria. There are refugee camps up there. And I'm not going to go into it. Go read Ezekiel chapter 35 and go read Obadiah, because I think this talks about the people who claim that they have a right to the land. These are prophecies I think are yet to be fulfilled. Here's a spoiler alert. It does not work out well for them. It's very similar to what it says in Joel. I bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I judge them there. Why? Because they have divided my land. And I'm just telling you, without a Jewish state of Israel, that makes no sense, that passage in Joel. And I see Christians twisting themselves like pretzels that try to get around it. It's shocking. And people are I agree with them on a lot of stuff, but not that one. And you can still be my friend, but I'm going to challenge you if I think you're being silly. So here's Netanyahu. Of course, he's a major player. I think he's not going to survive this. The day he came out and the U.S. wanted to have a ceasefire pause in Gaza, and people are saying, you can't do that. They're going to come after you, against you. Here's Tony Blinken speaking yesterday about this situation.
Even as we work toward progress on each of these urgent needs, we're focused on setting the conditions for a durable and sustainable peace and security. The United States continues to believe that the best viable path Indeed, the only path is through a two-state solution. That's the only guarantor of a secure Jewish and democratic Israel, the only guarantor of Palestinians realizing their legitimate right to live in a state of their own, enjoying equal measures of security, freedom, opportunity, and dignity. The only way to end a cycle of violence once and for all. And it's precisely now, in the darkest moments, that we have to fight hardest to preserve a path of stability, of security, of opportunity, of integration, of prosperity, and of peace. Not tomorrow, not after the war, but today.
So, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. They had a state in Gaza. How did that work out? Are you telling me you're going to go to anybody in Israel today and say, hey, well, except lunatics. I'm sure there are lunatics. There are lunatics everywhere. And you'll find them. You can find them all over Twitter. Pretty easy. I mean, my Twitter feed is just full of this garbage. I want to play a video. This is a video I found. And I'm going to turn the sound down here. Look at this destruction that you'll see. Look at the buildings destroyed. Whole neighborhoods just completely bombed to oblivion. Homes destroyed. People's lives uprooted. All these apartment buildings are destroyed. Now, in the context of talking about Gaza today and the destruction that's going on in Gaza, and it's horrific, a lot of people say, man, they really did a job on Gaza. But here's the problem. This video isn't of Gaza. This video is of Damascus. So my question again is, how many demonstrations worldwide have taken place to protest this? Probably 1 million people dead. How many demonstrations? Not many. And they'll blame somebody else. So Bashar Assad, he gets away with it. And here's Nasrallah. And there's this interesting video of Nasrallah. So before he goes to give his speech, he's giving a speech on Friday, November 3rd. Never announced the location. He never appears, of course. He lives in a bunker. He lives underground. He very rarely comes up. He does have meetings with people. He met with the guys from Hamas, by the way, 3 weeks before the attack on October 7th. But we didn't have anything to do with it. It wasn't Iran. But it was Iran and Hezbollah at the meeting with the Hamas guys. We didn't have anything to do. We didn't even know about it. So here's a video they put up of, this was kind of, everybody's like trying to interpret the symbolism. Here's Nasrallah walking in front of the Hezbollah's sign, and then he goes and he's signing these papers. And this is before the speech. So a lot of people are saying, well, they're going to, and he has a special ring on. Looks a lot like Soleimani's ring. You can see he's taken his glasses off. He's given a lot of thought to this. So a lot of people thought that what he's going to do is he's going to declare war on Israel in his speech. And of course, there's Al-Quds, the Dome of the Rock, got a tear forming in his eye, going over his speech. And you think I'm long, this guy, he's always an hour and a half. And he doesn't use PowerPoint very often. So here's another one. This is people getting ready to listen to him. Big crowds in southern Lebanon where he's, the video screen was put up where he's speaking. Here's a picture of him. So he does this speech. Now, some of the people leading up, Hezbollah has had a lot of losses. About 20%, 25% of the people killed in this 2006 Lebanon war, which lasted 37 days, have already been killed, even though the war really hasn't started in the north. And here's Hezbollah, or Assad, or Nasrallah giving a speech. And he said that Israeli civilians in Gaza border communities were killed on October 7th by Israeli forces who were acting insanely as they were caught by surprise and were drunk, not by Hamas. That's what he actually said. And so that's what I'm saying is when you're passing this on that Israel planned this and Israel did this, it's not much. Hezbollah is going to pick up of it and they're going to say this is the fact. Look at these people out here saying this. That's my concern about it. Okay? And so maybe that's what turns out to be the case. But there's a big investigation that has to take place first. That's my concern. So he said this blessed and broad operation was decided and implemented by Palestinians, and its owners hid it from everyone, even from the resistance factions in Gaza. The decision made by the resistant movements is made by the leaders of the resistant movements, and what happened in the past and in the Al-Aqsa flood confirms this fact. It has no relation to it, or it has no relation at all to any intentional or regional issues. We didn't know about it. It took us by surprise too. Now he goes on and says, well, Israel's got a third of its army up here. They've evacuated 43 communities, maybe, 100,000 people. And those people don't know when they're going back. And they're trying to, and then they're now, he didn't really declare war. He said, we're not going to do this. Here's some key points on his speech. Let's see. He goes, Hezbollah has entered the war. The intensity depends on Israeli behavior toward Lebanon and how the situation develops in Gaza. In case of a regional war, U.S. ships and the Air Force will pay a heavy price. We have ships out there in the Mediterranean. Preparations have been made to destroy all U.S. naval assets. The Al-Aqsa operation was an independent decision by Palestinians. If Israel bombs our civilians, we will bomb their civilians. How they act will determine how we will act. Yemen and Iraqi forces will intensify their attacks on U.S. and Israeli assets. The U.S. should remember its humiliating defeats in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So, again, he reiterated that Israel killed its own citizens, wildly cheering crowds. Palestinians were upset. They didn't think he went far enough. He should have declared war. He did not do that. I don't trust him. I'm like, I don't believe anything he said. They may expand the war. I don't know yet. Here's the problem, though, and he said in the speech, all options are on the table. So that doesn't sound like he's shying away from war. He's just saying, we'll decide when we want to do it. And here is a look at the dividing line. So this is from the Times UK, and this is pretty much true in the U.S. Like Republican support, about 67%, and independents is about 17% supporting Israel, and Democrats is nobody really supporting Israel. And among young people, college age and a little bit older, above 50% think Hamas is doing just fine. They support Hamas. Protests all over the world. Putin, he's got involved. His ambassador at the UN essentially said, listen, Israel doesn't really have a right to defend itself in this situation. In Dagestan, in Russia, a mob, it's a Muslim part of Russia. And believe me, Russia has a Muslim problem. They stormed an airport. They they tried to get on an airplane that they heard came from Tel Aviv, and they were demanding to see passports to determine whether the people were Jewish. They were even looking in the airplane engine for them. Somebody, But listen, I've often said this for, 25 years at least. If Russia is a part of this Ezekiel 38, 39, maybe one of the hooks in the jaw is they want to get the Muslim problem off their backs for a while. So what would get the Muslim problem off their backs? Look at the map that Erdogan put up. We'll go attack Israel. We'll help you attack Israel if you leave us alone for a while. Now, Hamas, Wagner is supposed to be giving this Panzer anti-aircraft, anti-missile thing to Hezbollah that's coming from Syria. Seth Bransman has a pretty good article on this in the Jerusalem Post today. The Panzer it's good, but it's not that great. It's not that great at shooting things down. Iran's getting involved in a lot of things. Here's one of the heads of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard says that Israel is like a dagger plunged into the body of the Islamic world. Here's some headlines from the Tehran Times. Prime Minister, that's Netanyahu, is finished. He's called that in Israel. This is maps from China, by the way, an ally of Iran. Russia's an ally of Iran. But here's maps in China on Alibaba's website. What did they do? They took Israel off the map. It's not there. Palestinian territories are there, but Israel's gone. And Iran's trying to, they don't know, what are we going to do? Do we send our troops in, or because they're just using proxies. They never go in. Here is a meeting. This is in Qatar, with the Iranian foreign minister and the head of that country. Oil rich, 400,000. Everybody gets a couple million a year. And now the question, this is a good article at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. There should be a link to this article in the notes that accompany the video on YouTube. And it says the ultimate goal of the war, a new regional and global architecture. So these are intelligent guys, and they say the Gaza war should serve to upend the existing order and usher in a new regional order. The transformation will be reflected in a new regional framework that relies on the normalization process between Israel and the Arab world, spearheaded by Saudi Arabia. In other words, they think we're going to go back to this the way it was. And I think that this is going to be the case when Israel wins the war. If they win it decisively, the Saudis will respect the strong horse. Dr. Mordecai Kedar, he got a longer segment than I did, but that's okay. He could have had my time, frankly. I would have listened to him. On Alex Newman a week ago. Excellent guy. Go look him up on the internet. Mordecai Kedar, Kedar. Very intelligent guy. And so they're saying that they're going to go back to this framework. And I think that that's probably going to be a case. The state of Israel should not settle for merely destroying Hamas, but rather needs to adopt absolute security responsibility in the Gaza Strip for many years. Only in this way will it be possible to restore civilian trust in the IDF and enable the renewed flourishing of the communities in the Western Negev. And that's right. The new regional order also necessitates a departure from contemporary paradigms, including that of the need to support the Palestinian Authority without it undergoing a fundamental change. The war in Gaza highlights the weakness and irrelevance of the Palestinian Authority. Talk of it resuming control of Gaza is divorced from reality. Due to its weaknesses, corruption, and illegitimacy, the Palestinian Authority is incapable of governing the Strip. And there's concern that Hamas has majority support within the area of the West Bank. I mean, you go around the West Bank and talk to people, they'll tell you, if you ask them nicely, that they support Hamas. They hate Abu Mazen. And Mordecai Kedar has a theory, I think it's very well stated, that their culture is very tribal. And so Mahmoud Abbas is from a different tribe, and so they don't like him if they're not part of that tribe. That's why, so he proposes something like the United Arab Emirates to get them governed. And here's an article in Jerusalem Post. I don't have time to go into it. It's in Friday's Jerusalem Post. What will victory in Gaza mean for Israel? This is the former head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohen. And he says, listen, we don't need to just go Gaza. We need to go after the Iranians that planned this. And he knows what's going on. The academics thing in this country is out of control with the support for Hamas. Law schools have said, listen, you shouldn't do this. They're taking a stand. 24 giant law firms in the United States have said, they've even gone to people that they've made offers to and withdrawn the offer. You support Hamas, you're not coming to work for us because you've proved that you really aren't a very good thinker. That's how they would do it. this article editorial in the Jerusalem or the Wall Street Journal the other day. The two countries are working together against U.S. allies and interests. And who is that? The Iran-Russia military axis. There's also these pictures. They're attacking ambulances. But you can see videos from prior years, 2014, and when there were these dust-ups with Hamas in Gaza, they use ambulances to get around. So they shoot an ambulance, and, oh, it's just terrible what they did. This is The Economist. The pace of Israel's war in Gaza far exceeds previous conflicts. This is not like anything that we've seen before. Now, here's Barry Weiss and Walter Russell Mead, and this is kind of where I got my title today, and I want to play a couple minutes of this, and I got to find it. Hang on. No, excuse me a second. I have to do this. This is old school. This is audio only. So here's Walter Russell Mead. Okay, this is going to jump in the middle of it, but I think you'll get the point here pretty quickly.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
There.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, Mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody.
And an era of permanent calm. It was the eye of the storm. And we are now going, it looks to me like the eye is passing over and we're about to get hit with the backside of the storm.
Every time we talk, I'm just so compelled by what you have to say. And I go back to what you were saying earlier in this conversation about how we need Biden to have these fireside chats, and we need sort of the energy and the focus and the duty of all of these different aspects of American private sector, American citizens pushing in the same direction toward a broader goal that is so much bigger than any one of us. And then I look to President Biden, or I look to former President Trump. And frankly, I look to like the halls of the Senate and Congress, at least most of them, and think, oh my God, who could possibly be the leader that could do that kind of work? Because I just don't see that capacity in our current president. Like, is this moment going to also sort of usher in a new set of American leaders with a very different understanding of our place in the world? Or who do you look to for a bright spot, I guess? Help me with my pessimism about the current slate of leaders who you could say have brought us to this pass, and I don't necessarily think are the ones to get us out of it.
Well, I will say, even though I'm one of them myself, I think the baby boom generation has been a disaster in terms of American foreign policy, American educational policy, the direction of American society, and it really is time for a change. We do need a new generation of leaders with new perspectives. Now, that said, the thing that worries me most is guess who educated these younger generations? The boomers. In that sense, we have not done our part. You look at the state of American universities, we were talking about that a little bit at the start of the conversation, in the intellectual leadership that should have been making our universities beacons of hope, freedom, innovation. On the science side, we're not doing that bad of a job, but anything having to do with the humanities, social sciences, we seem to have utterly lost our way. So I do worry that we've got a new generation coming along that's going to have to punch through a lot of illusions, false teaching, bad ideas, and ultimately find their way to solid ground. That's what's going to have to happen. I think it will because it has to.
One of the things that has happened since the massacre of October 7th is, I don't even know the right word, explosion seems too weak, an orgy of anti-Semitic assaults, harassment, and violence all over the world. From Dagestan to Montauk, New York, to Cornell University.
Judy was boring.
So she's right. In one of the other parts of the discussion that they had, you can go to get her podcast, Barry Weiss, Honestly. And near the end, about an hour or 5 minutes into it, they talk about we're going through this period of massive, humongous change. And listen to what Barry says. We need leadership. We need someone to come in and talk to us and have a fireside chat with us and lead us through this terrible time. And she's not a lunatic. But what does that sound like the world is being set up for? Now, when I talk about this, people say, oh, well, you want to bring Armageddon. You want all this. No, I don't. I'm just reading the book. I'm just telling you what's coming. My eschatology, I don't cause it to happen. Around my house, I get to control my golf clubs and the lawnmower and my computer. Okay, I don't have an army. And that's not a slam at my wife. She does a fantastic job with all the other stuff, praise the Lord. But Christians don't have armies. But the Muslims, they believe, I shouldn't recommend them, but Glenn Beck put up something yesterday about Iran. I thought it was pretty good. And the Mahdi and all this stuff, and they're saying the Mahdi coming is close. But they believe that they can cause chaos on the world, and that will bring the Mahdi in. They can bring in the end times. I don't believe their eschatology is true. I believe that they think it's true. There's a difference. That's a pretty big difference. And they can cause the end times by chaos and bringing about an Armageddon type scenario. So all these little Twitter fanatics run around, oh, you Christians, you want Armageddon. I want Jesus to come back and fix it. You want somebody to fix it? Who do you think? Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Donald Trump? Anybody on the world scene yet? But they're clamoring for it. That's the point. And so Meade goes through and he says, we're going through this massive, humongous change. We had the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution changed the way families were organized. It became, instead of an extended kin clan taking care of families, it became a nuclear family. Now we're going through a thing where they don't even want to have children. And birth rates are collapsing all over the place. And what does the future look like when there are no people to populate it? But at the same time, we're going through this, and I'm going to go over a few minutes because I just want to talk about something. I will cover it more in a midweek if I have time to do a midweek this week. But it's a big deal because there's another industrial revolution going on, and that's AI. Elon Musk's company, he said, we're coming out with our large language model, and it's going to change the field. It's called XAI. And that was supposed to launch yesterday. This week he went there. Just a couple things before I get to Elon. Good article I want to recommend. Again, the link is in the notes under the YouTube description. Jonathan Spire published at Middle East Forum, where Jonathan Spire is one of their lead analysts, if not their lead analyst. Published yesterday, The Australian in Australia. Clock ticks for Israel on hostages, Hamas, and diplomatic grace. What he said is Israel has all of these competing interests. They got to get in there and do something. They got to do it, but the soldiers were he went down and saw them at the base where I was in December. They were being trained on how to go in there. And then they're going in. Now, I don't know how many have been killed. I hear that the number of dead IDF is about 400 so far, but that includes the 300 or so killed on October 7th. So I don't know how many have been killed in these operations. I haven't been getting what I consider to be verifiable information on that. I know people their funerals being held, so I know that there have been IDF soldiers killed. But he said, look, they just had to be trained, and then they were going in. But yet the U.S. saying, oh, you guys need to pause, you can't do this. Got to prepare the ground. It's very difficult. Some of these tunnels, Russia Today did a thing where the guy went down in the tunnels, and they're like 230 feet deep, some of these. and they're narrow. They're only, like I said, I was going to go through one in the mock-up that they have of Gaza City, and I sort of measured my shoulder width and the width of the tunnel and the width of me if I turn sideways. Okay, I know you're thinking that. And I wasn't getting through. So I said, I'm gonna go back out. You guys, you skinny guys can go through. But they're going in with backpacks, body armor, helmets, and all this other stuff. And they can only go through single file in a lot of these tunnels. So this is a difficult operation. Pray for people's safety. Pray for the innocent people of Gaza too, that they'll be allowed to leave. It's a difficult problem. Amir Avivi, again, there's a link in the notes. He's head of the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. Wrote a great article thinking through this. It's not that long. You can read it in a few minutes. Published this week, the day after Hamas, we need to start planning. What's going to happen? And he's thinking about this. What does victory look like, and how do we manage it when we get there? And he says there's 3 conditions. We have to take over the border. Israel must ensure that it has freedom to operate in Gaza in order to destroy terror infrastructures. And then there's a third thing, and I'm not seeing here. You can go read the thing again, the link is in the notes in the YouTube description. I'm going to have a mercy thing here.
If there's any chance of us being able to act constructively to do something, it will require an admission of complexity and maintaining what on the surface may seem contradictory ideas. That what Hamas did was horrific and there's no justification for it. And what is also true is that the occupation and what's happening to Palestinians is unbearable. And what is also true is that there is a history.
Okay, you don't want to listen anymore to that, right? But does it sound like he really went away? Honestly? That's why I call it the Biden administration. I rest my case. Here's, just horrific things. This is an example of, so this was an Israeli airstrike, blew up a ambulance. Now, folks, let's think about it a little bit. What do you see under the ambulance? A horse cart, right? Is it possible the ambulance hit a horse cart? There's so much propaganda. This is outside the White House last night. They're climbing the fence, beating on the fence, trying to get over the fence into the White House. How many of them do you think are being prosecuted for that? This is the protest in D.C. on the mall. On the left is Berlin. Pro-Palestinian, anti-Jew things. They're putting Jewish stars on homes and businesses all across Europe where Jewish people live or work. And it's happening here in the United States. But on the right, that's Washington, D.C. And again, this is part of what they've been trained that Walter Russell Mead was talking about in his interview with Barry Weiss. We've trained these people to think about identity, and now they're completely blind. They can't even see the evil that's happening. Here's a picture of the D.C. protest. That was one of the people at the D.C. protest. Now, on that date in January of 2021, were those, I don't know if those symbols were there. But the whole FBI runs around saying that you're all a bunch of that. And it's just a big fat lie. You know, Christopher Wray worked for a law firm, and he's the FBI director. You know how much he was making at that law firm? $15 million a year. You've heard him testify. Do you think it's because he's so smart? No, it's because he knows how to wield power. That's how he gets paid that much. And so here, this is Charing Cross train station. I was in there in UK there a few years ago. Big train station full of pro-Palestinian demonstrators. This is truth is the latest casualty in a vicious propaganda war, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. But here's the thing is, this is the intersection that's taking place. You have these identity politics, and Walter Russell Mead said, man, the Industrial Revolution was pretty rough. And 100 years ago, we were in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Now we're in one that's unlike any that we've had, and the Middle East is melting down. And AI is coming. And so here's what Musk said, I don't think you'll have to work with AI coming. Well, what are all these people out marching around going to do? Look at this.
I think AI is one of the biggest threats. I mean, we are, for the first time, we have a situation where there's something that is going to be far smarter than the smartest human. So, you know, we're not stronger or faster than other creatures, but we are more intelligent. And
not all of them.
And here we are, for the first time, really in human history, with something that's going to be far more intelligent than us. So, it's not clear to me we can actually control such a thing. But I think we can aspire to guide it in a direction that's beneficial to humanity. But I do think it's one of the existential risks that we face, and it's potentially the most pressing one. But if you look at the time scale and the rate of advancement, I think the summit is timely, and I applaud the Prime Minister for holding it.
That was in the UK this week. In London, where they're having all the pro-Palestinian things. So I'm just saying and he said, jobs for the bots people. Half people fear that AI is going to replace them. And Elon said, well, you won't have to work. You'll have a high basic income that will provide you. I'm just saying this is on an epic scale. And Biden came out with an executive order this week, and I'll talk more about that in the future. But because it's a big problem. We all acknowledge it's a big problem. But thank goodness Joe Biden is on top of it. I mean, I'm going to go home and take a nap this afternoon. I may go sleep just because I don't want to think about what's going on. Anyway, a lot of stuff. But do you see how all this is related to Bible prophecy, Middle East centric, and another industrial revolution type thing going on, and culture, and it's what did I title this thing? Massive, humongous change. But we know how it works out, but it can be bumpy till we get there. So let's pray. Lord, thanks for your word. Thanks for the time. The blessing that you gave us to tell us about some of these things in advance. And so, Lord, I just pray you'll help us to get ourselves organized in faith communities, support one another, speak the truth in love, but give us an extra measure of the Holy Spirit so we can deal with the very complex, difficult issues that we have in this day. And not that we have a spirit of fear, but one of power, and that you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel with those, because it does appear the time is getting short. And the